I moved into a small house on a quiet street after turning 24. It was a new beginning for me. The city wasn't glamorous, but I didn't care. I needed peace, space, a place where I could hear myself think for once. The neighborhood had that stillness I hadn't realized I missed. No sirens. No thudding bass lines from someone else's party. Just wind, birds, the occasional dog. The house had this sloped roof that creaked at night, old floorboards that groaned under my steps, and a tiny backyard where I could sit with a mug and feel, for the first time in a while, like I wasn't just surviving. A woman in her 40s lived 2 houses down, attractive, confident, with a calm energy that I definitely lacked at the time. Her name was Annabelle. She had this shoulder-length hair that caught the light when she moved, and this voice, steady, low, like she was always half laughing at something private. She walked with this ease, like she'd already figured out everything and didn't feel the need to prove it. I remember the first time we spoke. I was outside, struggling to carry in a warped bookshelf from my car, and she called out, "Need a hand." Not in a nosy way, just friendly, grounded. I said I had it, but she walked over anyway, didn't even hesitate. She grabbed the other end and helped carry it to the porch. "New to the neighborhood?" she asked, brushing her hands on her jeans. "Yeah, just moved in last week." She smiled. "I'm Annabelle. I'm 2 doors down. You'll hear my wind chimes when it storms." She wasn't flirting. Not then. She was just being kind. At first, we were just neighbors. A wave in the morning, a smile when the trash cans went out. She had a garden, not flowers, vegetables. Tomatoes, squash, herbs in clay pots. She once offered me a bag of rosemary just because she had too much. Another time, she knocked on my door holding a covered dish. "I made too much stew," she said. "Can't let it go to waste." We started talking more. Not deep stuff. Weather, lawns, what time the mail usually came. But her eyes lingered a little longer each time. Our small talk started to stretch. I'd catch myself listening for her footsteps on the sidewalk, waiting for her morning smile. She started coming over with coffee, sometimes food. "Because I cook too much," she said once, setting a Tupperware container on my counter. "And eating alone gets boring." It felt casual, easy, but also something else. One evening, I heard a knock. She stood on my porch holding half a watermelon. "You can't eat a whole one alone," she said. "Well, you can, but you'll regret it." I cut it up, and we sat out back, legs propped on the railing, the rind pieces in a bowl between us. The sky went pink and then dark. We talked about music, bad dates, our favorite breakfasts. I don't remember laughing that much in a long time. No promises. No flirting. Not exactly. But her fingers brushed mine once, and neither of us moved them away. I don't even remember deciding to stay the night. We were just talking. Then it got late. She looked at me like, I don't know. Like it was okay to not pretend. Like she saw through the quiet parts of me I never showed anyone. So I stayed. And the next night too. We didn't talk about that first night. Or the second. There was no "so what are we now?" No labels. But something had shifted. Her robe was draped over my kitchen chair the next morning like it belonged there. She padded barefoot across my floor like she wasn't visiting. Like this was her home too. She brought eggs. I made coffee. We didn't speak much that morning, and it didn't feel weird. It felt easy. After that, we fell into a rhythm. Mornings blurred into afternoons. She'd show up with groceries and say something like, "Felt like chicken soup today." Or "Thought you'd like this coffee." I started buying her oat milk without even thinking about it. She started leaving a toothbrush at my place. Quiet things we didn't name. We took a weekend trip to Asheville once, last minute. She drove. I just packed a bag and followed. We got a little cabin in the woods and spent hours walking quiet trails, barely talking. I remember her brushing leaves from my hair like it was the most natural thing in the world. I started noticing how different she was from anyone I'd known. She didn't need to fill silence. She didn't ask for things, she just did them. When she touched me, it wasn't about anything performative. It was just presence. Her hand on my knee, her head on my shoulder during a movie. I never felt like I had to be anything with her. And still, no one knew. Her friends didn't know. Mine didn't either. We walked separately in public, sometimes crossed paths in the grocery store, and barely nodded. Once, I passed her on the sidewalk when she was walking her dog, and all she said was, "Hey, neighbor." It hurt in a strange, quiet way. But I understood. We built this private universe. Her robe on my chair, my books on her nightstand. Shared playlists. Inside jokes. A drawer with both our toothbrushes. But it was all behind closed doors. That separation made it feel more intense, somehow. Sacred. And yet, it couldn't last. She'd go quiet sometimes. Stare out the window longer than usual. Her smile would falter for no reason I could name. I tried not to ask questions, but I started to feel it in the space between us. One night, while we were cooking dinner, she said, "Do you ever think about where this is going?" I didn't know how to answer. Because the truth was, I didn't want to ask what we were. I didn't want to press her. I was afraid of what the answer might be. A few days later, she said she was thinking about selling her house. She didn't look at me when she said it. Just kept folding a towel like it mattered more than it did. That's when I knew. She was leaving, and I wasn't invited to follow. We didn't fight. We didn't cry. There wasn't some big emotional scene. One evening, I came over, and she hugged me like it was goodbye. She kissed my forehead. Said, "Thank you for this chapter." That's all she said. And I left. I stayed on the same street after she left. I thought about moving, but I didn't. I told myself it was because the rent was decent, the commute manageable. But if I'm honest, I stayed because of the memories. Her house. The porch light that used to be on late into the night. The wind chimes I hadn't heard since. It felt strange walking past it. The curtains stayed closed. The garden she once kept so carefully began to wilt. Her chair, the one with the cushion and the little blanket draped over it, sat untouched behind the window. Just shadows now. I started dating someone. It wasn't serious. She was sweet, funny, laughed at my bad jokes. But something was always missing, and I knew exactly what it was. The quiet. The knowing glance from across the kitchen. The small silences that didn't need filling. The way Annabelle would just reach over and take my hand when I couldn't find words. I'd sit on my porch some evenings, coffee cooling beside me, staring at the yard where her tomatoes used to grow. Everything reminded me of her. Of us. I didn't know where she'd gone. I didn't ask around. I think part of me was scared to know she was really gone. That she had moved on. That I was just a closed chapter to her, like she'd said. "Thank you for this chapter." That phrase stuck with me more than I wanted it to. I tried to forget it. I couldn't. And then came spring. The trees bloomed. The wind came warm. The air carried that soft, earthy smell, fresh-cut grass, rain on pavement, all of it. I was walking through the farmer's market on a Sunday, a reusable bag slung over my shoulder, buying things I didn't need just to fill the quiet. And I saw her. She stood by a honey stand, hair a little longer now, loose and wavy, wearing a linen shirt and jeans. Freckles a little more visible. She looked different, but not in a way I could name. Freer, maybe. Lighter. Like someone who had finally exhaled after holding her breath for too long. I didn't mean to stare. She caught me anyway. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, it was like nothing had passed at all. She walked over first. "Hey," she said. "Hey," I answered, and my voice cracked just slightly. We hugged, not too long, not too short. Just right. "You look good," she said, studying my face. "So do you," I replied, meaning it. She really did. We stood there in the noise of the market, surrounded by chatter and movement and smells of coffee and pastries, but everything between us was quiet. She asked how I'd been. I told her I was working more, trying to write again. She smiled, said she was doing freelance consulting now, that she was living with a friend, for now, just to reset. We didn't say, "I missed you." We didn't say, "Do you remember?" But I felt it. In the way she stood, in the way her voice softened when she said my name. When she left, she touched my arm lightly and said, "It was good to see you." "You too," I said. And I meant that more than I expected. She walked away. And I stayed there a moment longer, not moving, watching her disappear into the crowd. After that day at the market, things didn't change, exactly. I didn't see her again the next week, or the week after. She didn't call. I didn't text. But something had shifted in me. Like just knowing she was still out there, that she still carried some version of what we'd been, made everything a little less heavy. I stopped by her old house once. Walked past slow, coffee in hand. The for sale sign was gone, but no one seemed to live there yet. No cars in the driveway. The garden was overgrown. Her wind chimes were still hanging, silent. There was this moment when I thought about walking up the porch steps, knocking on the door just to remember the sound it made under my feet. I didn't. Instead, I went back home. Sat on my own porch. The coffee had gone cold by then, but I sipped it anyway. I watched the light filter through the trees and tried to name the ache in my chest. It wasn't grief, not really. And it wasn't regret. It was more like recognition. That some moments only live once, and if you're lucky, they echo. A few days later, I saw her again. Not in person this time, in a photo. I was scrolling through the local magazine's online issue. They'd done a feature on a community consulting group helping with small business support downtown. There she was in the back of the photo, not the focus, but unmistakably her. Arms crossed, slight smile, hair pulled back. Confident. Unbothered. I stared at that photo longer than I should have. I wondered if she'd seen me since the market. If she ever drove past. If she ever sat on her porch and looked toward mine. Then, one morning, early, before the street had really woken up, I found a small brown envelope tucked between my front door and the screen. No name. No address. Just folded paper inside. On it, written in handwriting I knew immediately, were 3 words. Some mornings linger. That was it. I stood there holding it, feeling like the air had thickened. The ink wasn't fresh, but it hadn't been there long. I looked up and down the street. No one. I kept that note on my kitchen table for days. Every time I passed it, it felt like she was still near. Like she was saying, I remember, too. We never made plans. Never said, let's try again. And honestly, I didn't expect that. I think she knew we'd had our time. But maybe there was still space for something else. Not a beginning, not an ending. Just a thread between 2 people who'd once shared a quiet universe. Now, every so often, I see her in town. At the bookstore. At the co-op. Always alone. Always calm. We smile. Sometimes we say hello. Sometimes we don't. But I always feel it, that gentle pause in my chest. That flicker of what we had, and what still lingers. Some things don't need to be spoken to stay alive. That's what I kept thinking months after Annabelle had left and come back. Not to me, not exactly, but into my orbit again. We didn't have plans, but every time I passed the farmer's market or stepped into the quiet of a bookstore, I looked for her. Not out of hope, not really. More like readiness. Like if the air shifted a certain way, I'd know she was near. Once, I saw her sitting on a bench outside the library, headphones in, staring up at the sky. She didn't see me, and I didn't call her name. I just stood for a minute, watching her exist in a world where I wasn't needed. Where maybe I never had been, not permanently. But back then, it felt permanent. The closeness, the things we never said but always meant. I remembered the Asheville trip, how she reached for my hand in the middle of a trail and didn't let go. The nights she'd curl against me in the dark and whisper things like, "You don't even know how much I needed quiet like this." I remembered how she once laughed until she cried because I tried, and failed, to make some complicated soup recipe she swore was foolproof. I remembered her robe, her mug with the chipped handle, her humming while she cooked. All of it, tiny things no one else saw, had built a life we never labeled. It hadn't been dramatic. There were no loud fights, no ultimatums. But in a way, that made it harder. The clean ending, the quiet exit. It left no cracks to pour myself into. Just space. Still, something in me held on to it. Not out of sadness, exactly. Just because I didn't know what else to do with those memories. So I started writing. Nothing big, not even full stories. Just fragments. Conversations. Scenes. The way she looked that night in my kitchen, slicing peaches barefoot. The way she'd sit at the edge of my bed, not speaking, not needing to. And I realized it had been real. Even without names, even without a future. Sometimes, I think we protect things more when we know they can't last. We keep them cleaner, untouched by the mess of day-to-day life. We hide them because we want them to stay whole. That's what Annabelle and I did. We created a little universe. And we didn't show it to anyone. Not our friends. Not our families. In public, we were distant, barely acquaintances. A smile here, a nod there. But inside those 4 walls, in the mornings, in the evenings, in the silences between, we were closer than I'd ever been with anyone. No one ever asked me about her. They couldn't. They didn't know. But sometimes, I wanted to tell someone. Not to brag. Not even a process. Just to say out loud. She existed. We existed. That's why I'm writing this now. Not because I need advice. Not because I want her back. Just because it mattered. Even after everything, I kept walking by her old house. It wasn't obsession. It was something quieter than that. Habit, maybe. Ritual. The way you pass an old school or a tree you used to climb and expect a version of yourself to still be there. Frozen. Unchanged. The house sat still. Whoever bought it hadn't moved in yet, or if they had, they kept to themselves. The porch was bare. No flowers. No chimes. Just us where her chair used to be. I tried filling the space she left with other people. A woman I met at work. Another from a friend's birthday party. We got drinks, went for walks, tried to find something in each other's words. But none of them made me pause mid-sentence just to look at them. None of them made silence feel like a conversation. I wasn't comparing. Not out loud. But I was. I started sleeping later, waking up with her note still on the table. Some mornings linger. It wasn't romantic. Not exactly. But it said everything we couldn't. Then one afternoon, I was coming back from the store. A quiet day. Sky overcast. I had headphones in and a bag of groceries balanced awkwardly on my hip. I turned onto my street, and there she was. Annabelle. She was standing by her old house, just outside the gate, looking at it like it still belonged to her. Or maybe like she was trying to remember if it ever really had. I pulled my headphones out and stopped walking. She saw me and smiled. "Hey," she said. "Hey," I replied, suddenly aware of how tight I was holding the grocery bag. She nodded toward the house. "Weird seeing it like this." "Yeah. I walk past sometimes." "You still live on the street?" "Yeah." She looked down, like she didn't know what to say to that. Then softly, "I don't think I realized how much I'd missed this place." We didn't mention the nights we spent there. The porch lights. The stew. The way she kissed me the night before she said she might sell it. But I felt it. So did she. "I'm staying across town now," she added, her voice light but distant. "Short term. Still figuring things out." I wanted to ask what that meant. Figuring out what? Where to live? Who to be? But I didn't. Instead, I said, "It's good to see you." She nodded. "You too." She walked away before I could think of anything else. Just turned and headed down the street like it didn't matter that we were standing in front of everything we never said. When I got home, I set the groceries down and stood in the kitchen for a long time. The fridge hummed. A bird chirped somewhere outside. And in that silence, I let it hit me. We were both still here. Still orbiting the same neighborhood. Still pretending it was just coincidence. But it wasn't. There was no clean ending. No sharp line to draw. Just a quiet thread that hadn't broken, even if we'd stopped pulling on it. Some evenings, I sit on my porch with a cup of coffee and listen to the rain. Not a lot happens. The world is quiet, my street emptier than it used to be. Sometimes the lights from the neighboring windows flicker against the trees. Sometimes a dog barks. And sometimes, if the wind moves just right, I think I can still hear her chimes. It's strange how things that seemed so big when they happened, the glances, the nights, the trips, eventually shrink into moments. Pieces you carry. Things you don't talk about because no one would understand unless they were there, too. But I remember. I remember her hand brushing mine as she passed me a bowl of soup. The way her voice dipped when she said my name in the dark. I remember Asheville, the cabin, the trail, how she looked at me when I said I didn't want to go back to the way things were. And I remember the last time I saw her. It was spring again. I'd gone to that same market where we crossed paths the first time after the goodbye. I wasn't looking for anything, just oranges, bread, something to fill a sundae. She was there. No warning. Just there. Standing at the same honey stall. Hair longer now. Freckles more visible. A different bag slung over her shoulder. But still her. Still Annabelle. We hugged. We talked. Nothing big. Just small things. How we'd been. How the street had changed. "No, do you remember?" "No, I missed you." But it hung in the air anyway. "I'm thinking of planting again," she said. "Somewhere new." I smiled. "You always did have a way with tomatoes." That made her laugh. Quiet, like before. She looked at me for a long moment after that. Not searching for anything. Just holding me there, in her gaze, like a photograph she didn't want to lose. "I'm glad I saw you," she said. "Me too." And that was it. She walked away. No drama. No what-ifs. No promises. Just two people who had shared something real. Something quiet. Something secret. And sometimes, when it rains, soft, steady, and the porch light flickers just right, I sit with my coffee and remember her. Not like someone I lost. More like someone I was lucky to know. Because some stories don't have an ending. Not really. They just need to be remembered.